Morning. Hope all you happy hikers are having a tremendous day. In today's video, I want to explore a little bit of my hike of the Cloche Silhouette Trail in Killarney Provincial Park over the last couple weeks. And it was somewhat unexpected. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's roll the introduction. Welcome to my Hikification. So when I originally thought about doing this vlog, I had this vision of this 2-3-part documentary style, really covering the Cloche Silhouette Trail and all its nuances. As you'll hear in the next little bit, the hike took a few unexpected turns. And as such, my footage was a little more limited than what I probably had anticipated. My narrative was definitely lacking. As such, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time describing the hike in a bit more of a retrospective view and throw some images that I did acquire through the course of those 5-6 days, all melded together in one vlog here today. So for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of hiking the trail or probably know anything about it, the Cloche Silhouette Trail is a 78-kilometer loop trail within the Killarney Provincial Parks. And the trail itself is across these kind of rugged quartzite peaks of the Cloche mountain range. Mountain range may be a bit of a misnomer as it doesn't really have any tall peaks, but I'll tell you now, it doesn't lack for inclines and declines to make the hike challenging. The trail itself was named after the renowned Group of 7 painter Francis Carmichael, who painted one of his most famous paintings, which depicts that mountain range in the Killarney Provincial Park. And so that trail has actually been named after that. The highest point though is only around 1,700 feet, with the lowest point around 500 feet. But the trail itself is very steep. Lots of peaks and valleys, kind of one after another. I would say probably would challenge even the most experienced backpackers. Now I was planning on taking about 6 days to hike the loop. And people take anywhere from 3 days to probably 8 or 9 days on the higher end. I was actually in my head thinking, and I heard it was hard, but thinking, okay, I've lost my trail legs over the 2-month, 3-month recovery since I was on the Appalachian Trail. So I probably want to take things a little bit slower. Pushing a maximum 20 kilometers in one day, which would be about 12 miles. And that resonated and seemed like a good plan. And as this trip for me was a little bit last minute, I didn't necessarily have the first choice of every campsite that I wanted. And so I did have to change the mileage up a little bit day to day to accommodate what was at least vacant for me to make that entire trip. To give a little bit of perspective though on probably how hard this trail is, for those that are attempting to hike the entire loop in under 4 days, there is a waiver you have to sign. And that waiver basically says if you need to be rescued, you will pay for it. And trust me, there are lots of places for unfortunate things to happen. So let's just start with day one. Just after 10:30. Took about 4.5 hours to get here, plus another half hour to check in. So interesting, it's been very dry here this summer, and so you actually had to show the park ranger your camp stove because there was a fire ban. And so unfortunately you weren't allowed to have any campfires through the course of the evenings. So parked the car and got off on the trailhead going clockwise. You can go either clockwise or counterclockwise. I went the clockwise route. And that first day I was targeting campsite which was H8. And so it was going to be about a 14-kilometer day. And I was going through what they call the Bay Fine section of the trail. And this was probably the easiest part of the trail overall. And perhaps brings up your confidence level a little bit and sets some unrealistic expectations of what the rest of the hike will actually look like. It was a really nice hike though. I was making good time. Those 14 kilometers probably took me about 4.5 hours. I ended up getting to the campsite around 3:30. So if you follow the trail, as you start up, you go past a number of different lakes, and really nice tranquil lakes. There's Lumsden Lake, Acid Lake, Cave Lake, Topaz Lake. And you kind of end at or around the start of what is the Three Narrows section of the trail itself. Last part of the trail is about a kilometer steep, somewhat steep uphill up an old logging road, which is called the Pig. And this is along the longest portage on the trail itself as well. And so that's kind of your first little bit of an indication that there could be some toughness ahead. So the Bayfine section is designated really by these nice rolling hills. Hike through a number of hardwood forests, and you come out on these lakes interspersed through the course of that afternoon. So that first day was a good day. Got in camp around 3:30 and had a real nice chance just to relax. The campsite itself, H8, while they'd seen some really nice campsites on the path up there, this one was on the tail end of the Three Narrows, the next section of the trail. So this is campsite H8 on the Three Narrows lake. Camp is all set up for the evening. The duplex is up and standing. It was a little bit of an ordeal. That ground was pretty hard. Got my water, the bear bag has been hung, and now I'm just going to relax a little and then have some dinner and then probably call it a pretty early night. The water levels were a little bit low, and it was really more of a creek than a lake itself, so there was no swimming, but it was nice in that you got to see wildlife. There was this deer that was just hanging around just across the little creek from me. Was well aware of my presence and probably spent about a half an hour just drinking from the water and eating from the plant life there and keeping an eye on me, and I got to kind of just, I guess, commune with nature a little bit. It was a great first day. Had a nice meal, ate well. Got to bed early and just really took it easy. It's nice to soak the feet for a bit after a long day of walking. This is going to be a bit of a different experience in that while I saw just maybe a couple people on the trail today going the other direction, I am essentially going to be spending the next 5 or 6 days pretty much by myself. The campsites are just me, so there's no kind of shared accommodation. And I hike alone, so it'll be interesting. In addition, I noticed about 2 miles in off the highway, lost all cell service. And since we're just going deeper into the wilderness over the next 4 days, I don't anticipate that to change. So it is also going to be 5 days without any connection to the real world. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Morning. Hope all you incredible individuals are having a great day. Welcome to the start of day 2. The mosquitoes are waiting for me, so I'm hiding out in the tent for a bit. Anyway, I guess we should get moving. Pretty intermittent sleep. There was a cacophony of bullfrogs around, and God, are they loud. And not that tranquil chirping or a ribbit, but really this kind of almost loud bark when they were talking to each other. For now, I kind of got to get moving and get away from these mosquitoes. So day 2. The plan for day 2 was actually probably the easiest day that I had anticipated through the course of the trip. It was a gentle 11 kilometers It was a relatively flat terrain for most of the day. Lots of roots and rocks and that type of stuff, but wasn't really physically strenuous. Just a lot of stuffed toast more than anything else. It did rain most of that day, especially through the morning part. So I had gotten off relatively early and took my time getting to camp around, I would say 2:30. 2:30, stopped for a really long lunch along the way. And the campsite I stayed at that night was H59, and it was down this half-mile hill off the trail. In retrospect, there was another one that was just on the other side facing the other lake. I probably would have gone there, as you really don't want to add the extra miles if you don't have to. But the lake itself was nice. It was completely desolate. There was nobody else on the lake. Most of day 2 followed along the 3 narrow section of the trail, or the 3 narrow lakes of the trail. And these lakes are interesting in, I guess, long ago in the early 1900s, they were 3 very separate lakes. And what the loggers at the time did is they dammed one end, and as the water levels rise, it connected all of these lakes together, creating what they called the 3 narrows. I was able to set up my duplex for the evening. And get a really good early start the next day as well. So day 3 is where things started to spiral out of control a little bit. This is through what's called the Hansen section of the trail for renowned Canadian quadriplegic athlete Rick Hansen. This section of the trail is probably one of the hardest sections of the trail. I went through these mountain ranges up to the Cloche mountains, as well as this deciduous forest underneath, and so you are going through a lot of peaks and valleys through the course of the day. And I hadn't planned it out very well because this was also supposed to be my longest day at 20 kilometers. The first few miles, not too bad. There's some gentle inclines, and then you get to, as you kind of come out of the 3 narrows, you come to a 30-meter, almost direct climb down, which was pretty treacherous. We've got a 30-meter descent. So for reference, this is straight. And that's where we're going. Almost straight down. We'll see you at the bottom. Followed almost immediately up a waterfall where you essentially climb the waterfall. From there, you come to Moose Pass, and Moose Pass is this about a 1.5 kilometer, I'm going to call it about a 45-degree straight inclination the entire way, and it's tough. That climb coming out of Moose Pass was no joke. Almost 400 meters from the bottom and pretty steep incline all the way. This day though, what was probably the toughest is once you kind of get to the top, you get to these quartzite white mountain range cliffs. And the sun beats down and reflects off these white rocks, and it just saps all the energy right out of you. There were also a couple sections where there were some longer carries without water. And through the course of the day, I would say there was probably about a 4 or 5 kilometer period where I ran short of water. Poor planning on my part, absolutely. One of the creeks had run dry, and so eliminated one water source. And the second one looked like the trail touched the lake, but when you got there, what actually happened was the trail was at the top of a cliff and the lake was down below, and there was no way to kind of get to that water source. So I ended up getting very dehydrated with what I would think is a bit of sunstroke, and getting quite sick as a result. It literally just took all the energy out of me, and I would go 100 paces and I'd have to sit down and take a break, and then I'd go another 100 paces and I'd have to sit down and take a break. This was more towards the tail end of the day, what turned out to be better part of a 10-hour day. Then about, I'd say 2 kilometers from the campsite where I was supposed to stay for the evening, I was on the top of one of these ridges. This grouse, I'm going to call it a grouse, I don't actually know what type of bird it was, flew out from the bushes and straight on attacked me. I'm assuming she was protecting a nest that was probably buried off to the side a little bit, but completely startled me, and I twisted my ankle. And I went over it pretty bad. The ankle swelled up probably to the size of an egg. And right away I knew something was not good. I was able to put some weight on it, minimal weight on it, but I was able to walk, thank goodness. And so here I am, probably about halfway through the hike, the furthest part away from the start of the trail, no cell signal, completely dehydrated, and I've gone over on my ankle. I did amble my way to the campsite. Made the mistake of finally getting to the water source and then being so thirsty, guzzling water, and of course, that's the worst thing you can do. I probably wasn't thinking all that clearly though, because it all came back up, and I was sick most of that day and into the next day. Couldn't keep anything down, couldn't eat a bite of food. I had this ringing in my ears that didn't go away, which I understand is also part of dehydration. And I quite literally set my tent up and crawled inside it and didn't move for the next 12 hours. I also had some weird stuff going on with my pH levels, obviously, because I had this really intense acid reflux at the same time. Constantly it would gurgle up and just pain. So I was a bit of a bad place. I had no energy whatsoever. I couldn't eat, I could barely drink, and my ankle is the size of an egg. That was a pretty scary night. When you're by yourself and you're dizzy and you're throwing up and you can't think straight and you're having trouble breathing, it's a bit worrisome. And so I did spend a little bit of time stressing over what was going to happen. So on to day 4. I mean, spoiler alert, obviously I got out. I'm here giving you the retrospective look of the hike, but it was questionable. And day 4 was supposed to be through the Silver Peak section of the trail. And this day is a lot of ups and downs. It winds its way through the southern side of the Cloche Mountains over the Killarney Ridge. It also has the highest peak, Silver Peak, of the trail itself. And you can tell by my breath, even first thing waking up, I can't get a deep breath.
Good morning, all you happy hikers. Hope you're having a good day. Welcome to day 4 of my hikification on the Cloche Silhouette Trail.
Luckily, I didn't have to get my bear bag because I was so tired the night before, and it's one of the first times I've ever done this. I actually just left the food in the bag in the tent with me and risked it because I didn't have the energy to hang a bear bag. But even breaking camp in the morning left me completely exhausted.
So the plan for today is really kind of, we'll see. The ankle, I've got it taped up with KT tape, so it's actually feeling pretty good. I'll have to be just very careful on my footfalls, obviously. But I'm mostly worried about my fatigue. I mean, I haven't done really anything this morning. I'm already breathing a little bit hard. So there's definitely something underlying going on. I guess the first test is going to be just getting out of the camp spot. It's about a half a mile journey uphill to the main trail.
And what you saw was, especially the uphills, I just couldn't do them. I would go 100 feet and I would sit down and I would take 5 minutes and I would go another 100 feet. And the inclines through this section of the trail, they were steep. This is not a 15 or 20 degree incline. You are going 45 degrees up to 60 degrees at times, straight up, going along the top of the ridge, and then straight down, and repeat and repeat. I would say there were probably a good 10 or 12 decent climbs.
First big climb completed. I'm exhausted. Not even a mile in, but that is a mammoth cairn.
Now, luckily, about halfway in the morning, I got to one of the alternate campsites. And I met another hiker. And it was actually one of the first hikers I had met on the entire trail. Fortunate for me, he was actually had a really tough first day and was contemplating turning around and retracing versus doing the entire loop. So we had stopped at the same campsite to get water. This other hiker, his name was Scott, great guy, had decided to turn around, and I can't tell you what a relief having somebody, not necessarily hiking, because we didn't hike together during, step by step, but at breaks and through the course of the day we would pass each other. Just knowing that there was somebody around was a huge weight off my shoulders. He ended up staying at the same campsite I was staying at that night, and knowing that I was still suffering, not just from the ankle, but the exhaustion, have somebody to kind of look out for you is very comforting. But we did make it to camp probably around 6 o'clock, so it turned out to be another 10, 11 hour day. In this case, 11 hours to go what was only 14 kilometers.
So this is the campsite for this evening. H47. It was a tough day. I'm pretty sure I am dehydrated still from yesterday. The symptoms of lack of appetite, the ringing in the ears, and just overall exhaustion was prevalent pretty much throughout the day. So I'm still a little bit worried. The ankle, once it was taped, surprisingly did pretty well. Pain here and there when it gets turned a little bit on a root or a rock, but as long as it's going straight and well planted, it was all right. So the plan for tomorrow, I think, is still to hike the last 12 miles or 12 kilometers to just beyond the crack and see if I can run into any day hikers. There's an alternate parking lot there that if I can catch a day hiker that's doing that in the late afternoon, then I can get a ride back to my original parking spot.
And then finally, day 5, for me at least, was through what is the Killarney ridge section, and it was very similar terrain to what we had seen the day before. White rock ridges reflecting the sun off you, making it really hot, then back down into the forest, up and down throughout the course of the day. This was going to be about an 11 kilometer section for me. You come across what's known as the crack, and so there's a lot of incline gain up to the crack.
Here we are, just at the top of the crack, about to descend down. It's been a grueling 7-8 kilometers. I got nothing left in the gas tank. Still unsure whether I'll be able to find a ride at the bottom or whether I continue on to the campsite as scheduled. Surprisingly, it's very empty here. Typically there's people all over. I guess being a Monday maybe negates some of that. So playing it by ear, but we'll see.
The crack, and then the crack is almost like this narrow, steep section carved out of the mountain itself, where you literally climb down through the crack between the two mountains to get to the lower elevation. very popular day hike because it is nearer to the trailhead. So as you come down this section, I did decide there is an alternate parking area more used for people that day hike up to the crack section of the Cloche Silhouette Trail versus continuing on to what was supposed to be my campsite for that evening, campsite number H50. Instead of doing that extra 1.2 miles that direction and then 7 kilometers the final day, I could do 1.2 kilometers to the alternate trailhead and take a risk that I could find a ride to get me back to my car and end the hike a day early. Because of how I was feeling, the symptoms I was having, the fact I wasn't still able to eat, the sheer exhaustion I was experiencing as I hiked, I did decide to take a risk. I did not want to do one more night out there. So I took down to the alternate trailhead, bid Scott a farewell and the best of luck as he continued on backtracking the way he had come and would continue on for another day. And was very fortunate when I got to this alternate trailhead, even though we hadn't seen a lot of hikers, there was a car just happened to be turning around there. So I waved them down and these two lovely women stopped, allowed me to throw my backpack in the back of their truck, and I got in the back with their 3 Shiba Inu dogs, which was just a nice pleasant surprise. I love those dogs. And they drove me back to the original parking spot. So I ended up getting back to my car probably around 4 o'clock and drove to the next town, which was about an hour and a half away. Got a hotel for the night before coming home. So a little update on the injury. I got home and probably took about 2 or 3 days to rebalance myself. Couldn't eat, stomach still very unsettled. There's a lot of acid reflux. Couldn't drink anything like orange juice or coffee that would really just constantly burn. And anything I did eat was just very small quantities, and gradually I got back to normal. But it did take, I would say, 3 days for my system to kind of recalibrate. Luckily my hunger is back now and I'm all good. The ankle, when I finally did get those KT tape off and unwrapped my ankle, it was still very swollen, but black and blue. And yeah, this is not dirt. So here we are a week and a half later, the ankle's still pretty swollen. I'm still weight bearing, but taking it pretty easy on it. It is quite a bit better, but I think it's gonna take a little bit more time. I will admit, hiking alone and injuries has been a little bit of the bane of my existence over these last 2 hikes. To the point where I am reconsidering my philosophy around longer hikes, whether I still have that inclination, especially to do it alone, and whether that's part of the enjoyment or now more of a detriment. The trail was really challenging. The terrain was challenging. It was rarely flat after those first couple days, and those climbs, well, I didn't make to the White Mountains on the Appalachian Trail. I would probably parallel that as the most proximal comparator of what that experience would be like, because a lot of it was hand over hand climbs versus actual hikes. Very remote. You don't pass any trailhead, you don't pass any roads. So for a full 5-6 days, you're out there by yourself. So all told, I strongly recommend this trail for anyone interested, with the caveat that it is a strenuous trail. Here's a last little view of some of what I saw.